fake news reports not that the National Guard protected families and businesses, but that Trump declared martial law, because nothing says dictatorship like no homicides for a week. Today, on The 10th Man.
A new phase of President Trump's crackdown on crime in Washington. It comes as the president threatens to send troops into other big cities.
The media reported not that Trump restored order in Washington and stopped murders cold, but that he militarized the city. And before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe and give this video a like. It tells YouTube this is worth watching and helps us bring more facts straight to you. Now let's talk about that word threatened. Because the truth is, the only people threatened by the Guard's presence were the criminals. Starting with the basics, the National Guard is supposed to be a stabilizing force. They get called up for riots, for natural disasters, and for national emergencies. Governors usually deploy them, but in Washington, D.C., there is no governor. That means the president has more direct authority there. When Trump deployed Guard troops to restore order in the Capitol, the media didn't frame it as protection, they framed it as provocation. And when he talked about possibly sending them to other cities, like Chicago or Baltimore, ABC said he threatens to send troops. He's not offering help, he's not committing to restoring order, it's always he threatens.
Trump also threatening to send troops to Baltimore. Maryland's governor has invited the president to visit the city. He claims Trump is engaging in scare tactics.
And here's the hypocrisy. Democrats only hate the Guard when Republicans call them. During the George Floyd riots of 2020, Democrat mayors begged for Guard units once their cities started burning out of control. On January 6th, the same Democrats blasted Trump for not deploying the Guard fast enough, although he did deploy them. At Biden's inauguration, Democrats demanded 25,000 Guard troops, plus fences and razor wire around the Capitol. Was that militarization? Because they didn't call that occupation, they called that defending democracy. Same troops, same uniforms, and same handguns, just a different spin. But under Trump, everything flipped overnight. Lafayette Square, June 2020. Guard troops clearing rioters were called militarization of Washington. Operation Legend in Portland, Guard deployments were painted as stormtroopers. And when Governor Abbott of Texas used Guard troops along the border, Democrats dismissed it as a political stunt. It was never the Guard they objected to, it was who gave the order. Back to ABC's morning show.
More than 2,200 National Guard troops deployed as part of President Trump's recent crackdown on crime in Washington, D.C. are now armed.
They warned that Guard troops in D.C. were now armed. As if that were shocking. As if Tim Walz hadn't told us about him carrying weapons of war. Of course they were armed. We ought to be wondering why they were not armed from the get-go. Protectors have to be armed. Even in Japan, the police carry weapons. Soldiers without weapons aren't a peacekeeping force. They're actually a parade. And here's what they didn't emphasize. The Guard's presence worked. Before they came in, Washington, D.C. was averaging a murder every 2 days. And it wasn't just homicides. Robberies were spiking, or surging. Carjackings were a daily threat. Assaults and shootings were a part of everyday life in the capital of the United States. And after the Guard arrived, murders stopped. Violent crime plummeted. And even the city's police chief, a political appointee, admitted safety had improved.
The Trump administration is touting more than 700 arrests so far. And the local police chief acknowledges federal agents have made safety improvements.
That's the real story. And that's what should have led the headlines. The nation's capital restored to its citizens. But the media stuck to their script. It was a show of force, a threat to democracy, an abuse of power. It's words, always misleading words for the Democrats and the media, while the facts of safer streets are brushed aside. D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser, for example, said Guard members were being hauled from their homes, their jobs, and their families.
I think calling men and women from their homes and their jobs and their families, they have to be used on on mission-specific items that benefit the nation.
But that's in fact what the job is. Citizen soldiers know they may be called to leave civilian life to serve at any time. They're not being exploited. That's what service is. Then came the phrase abuse of power.
But Democrats claim the president is abusing his power by declaring a crime emergency in D.C.
Democrats use that for everything. It's just become filler. It's really now no more than a slogan. It's not an argument. And what about that tired claim that crime in D.C. is at a 30-year low?
The president is abusing his power by declaring a crime emergency in D.C. when police data claim violent crime was already at a 30-year low.
Well, the reason it's tired in the first place is because that's the only thing they've been saying. Because, yes, crime in D.C. was down compared to its own disastrous past, its own past. But it was still one of the most dangerous cities in the nation. In fact, in the world. And Democrats, you can't have it both ways. Because when they push gun control, they call crime an epidemic. But when Trump cracks down in a city where crime is one of the worst in the country, then they tell us crime isn't a problem. So which one is it? So when Trump talked about sending Guard troops to Chicago and Baltimore, the media said again, he threatens. Governors called it scare tactics.
The reason that I've asked the president to come and join us is because he seems to enjoy living in this blissful ignorance, these tropes and these 1980 scare tactics.
But let's be honest. If any cities could benefit from stronger law enforcement, it's Chicago and Baltimore. Chicago recorded more than 770 homicides in 2020. My goodness, that's over 2 killings a day. Baltimore, a much smaller city, still logged around 330 murders that same year, almost one a day. That's one of the highest homicide rates in the country. The parents in those cities don't need word games. What they need are safe streets. They need the same transformation Washington saw when the Guard stepped in. Calling it scare tactics misses the point, and quite deliberately, because a credible threat deters crime. And if governors don't want Trump involved, they don't have to sit on their hands. As we said before, Trump doesn't have authority to deploy the National Guard in the states, but the governors do. The governors already have full authority to activate their own Guard units as law enforcement. And if they won't use that authority, then they're not protecting their people, which is their job. And don't let anyone tell you that Guard only defends the nation overseas. That's false. The Guard has always been called to protect Americans at home in a variety of situations. They respond after hurricanes. They back up police during riots. They patrol after tornadoes. My father-in-law did exactly that in 1953 after the Beecher tornado in Flint, Michigan. He left home, put on the uniform, and stood watch to keep order in a destroyed town. And he wasn't unarmed. He was carrying an M1 with fixed bayonet. And sometimes the Guard steps in when local leaders won't. And that's when the history books get written. In 1957, President Eisenhower sent federal troops to Little Rock, Arkansas. Why? Because the Democrat governor tried to block 9 black students from entering a public school. The Army ensured those children could exercise their constitutional rights. In 1962, President Kennedy sent them to Mississippi. Another Democrat segregationist governor tried to defy the course and keep James Meredith from enrolling at Ole Miss. But the Guard and federal troops cleared the path. Both times, then as now, Democrats screamed abuse of power. Both times, local jurisdictions resisted, and both times history proved the federal duty was clear. Protect citizens' rights, even when some politicians stood in the way. Democrats were on the wrong side then. They're on the wrong side now. The only difference wasn't the mission, it was the politics. The National Guard hasn't changed. Their mission hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the script. Democrats and the media throw words around like threat, scare tactic, and abuse of power, not to describe the actual reality, but to shape your perception of it. They treat results as intimidation and safety as if it's oppression. But mealy-mouthed words don't stop criminals. Words don't protect families or keep businesses open. But the National Guard sure can. And when politicians value rhetoric over safety, that's the real abuse of power. So if you found this breakdown useful, share it with a friend. That's how we spread facts wider than the spin. This is the 10th Man Podcast, with the arguments the mainstream media hopes you'll never hear. Because if an old retiree can find out the truth and broadcast it from his family room, then why can't the mainstream media? Thank you for listening.